I'm Santan Dave. This is AMR21. I am F1. Aston Martin. It's in our blood. We're gonna tell you a story. This is the story of Aston Martin Racing. About a spirit, seeing the future and knowing the past. A story before time when we could only listen. When dreams were pure and meant everything. There was a beauty, a beginning that transcended time and space. The power had arrived. It began in 22. If these tracks could speak, what would they say?
Flag falls and off they go.
What did they see and remember? It feels the roar and it listens to the beauty of speed and power. It's our history that we own. The soul, dreaming the dream, creating the machine, and within it, a spirit that never quits. The memory, the raw of truth, blood, toil. The passion born, the machines built, the creation of the glorious power. We have seen the future, and it is ours. Seen from above the skies and stars. Tech flows from the ground, defying gravity and time. Unstoppable, immeasurable. This is a god of traction, a circular shape of transition, and now we understand. Your heart races, our blood rushes, time never stops. This is the beauty and power of our dreams, our humanity, our heritage, our cause, our victory. The past has become the future. And that dream, as alive today, is when it started. Aston Martin. It's in our blood.
Hello, welcome back to the Eau Rouge podcast. Today, it is the hotly anticipated Aston Martin launch. Firstly, though, quick apologies for our Alpine pod yesterday, or actually today, really. The intention was to upload it yesterday, but as you can see from the beginning of the podcast, there were some difficulties, we'll put it that way, with the editing software, which Chris valiantly fought through and finally got it up today. So actually, this is more, Chris, of a congratulations, because I think you did a good job there, to be honest.
Thank you. It took me 24 hours, but we got it uploaded, and that's all that really matters.
But now we're moving on to Aston Martin, which I think out of all the teams, even though I think we were pleasantly surprised by Alpine yesterday, the way it looked, and there's a lot of intrigue around that team, I think this is the biggest launch of all. This is the one that we've all been waiting for. I say a brand new team. It's Aston Martin. It is. They're back in the sport for the first time in over 60 years. And I think also, judging by the pictures, it looks pretty incredible. I'm a big fan.
It looks lethal, I'll be honest. It's not the color scheme that blows me away, because like the Jaguar years ago, they've kept the racing green quite simple and mercifully haven't ruined it with BWT sponsorship. It's the bodywork. It just looks like a championship winning car, which I don't think I've said about anything except the Mercedes so far. It looks sensational. The work they've done to differentiate it from the Mercedes, we'll see if it pays off. But while you can't predict how the car will go from a photo, I'm wondering if having them down at third in my predictions for the season is too low.
Wow, already that's a big statement already. You're right. It looks incredible. Everything about it is beautiful, and I'm a big fan of British Racing Green. There's going to be a lot of comparisons this year between the Aston Martin and the Jaguar of, when was it now? 17 years ago, I think, was the last time Jaguar were in the sport, 2004, before Red Bull took them over. So you had that British Racing Green, which we've missed for that long. But this one looks more modern, obviously. It looks more sharp. It just looks a bit more, just looks prettier. And then there's also, like you said, there's going to be a lot of comparisons between this Aston Martin and the Mercedes. And like you said, they've tried to separate it out. And it's clear to see that they've done a good job on the surface to look at it. But we don't really know how this car is going to perform this year, do we?
No, we don't. But I'm excited to see. I think of all the teams coming into this season, Aston Martin are the most unknown quantity. You know, Merc are going to be up there. You know, Red Bull are going to be up there. You know, McLaren and Ferrari are getting better. Alpine, they'll be in the midfield. But Aston Martin could go either way. They had a fantastic 2020 the last season as Racing Point, and it's effectively the same team. It's consolidating on being one of the best teams last season, strengthening their driver lineup, I think, with the recruitment of Sebastian Vettel, and setting themselves up for a really, really exciting 2021.
So how significant is it that we've got Aston Martin back in F1? Because there's a lot of furore about it, but they only have competed in two previous F1 seasons, in 1959 and 1960. They were disastrous seasons. Now, obviously, they have been slowly eking their way back in over the last 15 years, most notably, almost recently, with as sponsors of Red Bull. So they have been in and around Formula One for a while now. There's been a lot of talk about them returning to the sport, and now they finally have. But what actually is the significance of Aston Martin's return to Formula One?
It's a nice nod to history, but I think ultimately you have to remember that Lawrence Stroll bought Aston Martin to rename Racing Point. This isn't the culmination of a group of passionate garagistas at Aston Martin bringing the team back. This is akin to the catering licensing deal, although perhaps slightly more glamorous, and you'd assume quite a lot faster. But it's nice to see it back. It is pleasant to have those flashbacks to F1's long and storied history. And Aston Martin are a team from the golden age of the early years. While nobody particularly notable drove for them back in there, Carroll Shelby as a racing driver, I suppose. That's not the point. It's nice that you look at the DBR5, their last car, and then you look at the AMR21 they've released today, and you feel like it's the same thing. And I think it's that nostalgia that Aston Martin are looking to pull people in with.
How long can you envisage them being in the sport for?
A while, actually. I think there's been a lot of criticism that the team is a vehicle for Lance Stroll. And perhaps it is. But Lance Stroll is still very, very young. He's only 22. If he stays in the sport for another 10 years, which he could do with some success, you're looking at a long-term thing. That's getting on for sort of Red Bull length commitment at this point.
Is it a case of, as long as Lawrence Stroll is in F1, Aston Martin are in F1?
Probably. I mean, given that Lawrence Stroll is now the majority shareholder in Aston Martin, you feel that the two are inextricably linked. But it's not to say that if the team was successful, it wouldn't pass on. I think it's early, like with Alpine, to try and judge what's going to happen, because I think both enterprises are so closely tied to what happens on track.
So we will talk about Stroll a bit later on, because there is plenty to discuss with him, and of course his father as well. But as you mentioned earlier, Aston Martin have somewhat strengthened their driver lineup by getting in Sebastian Vettel, four-time world champion, of course. But does he have something to prove this year? I mean, like I said, he's a 4-time world champion. Does he actually need to prove anything to anyone? He's one of the most successful Formula One drivers of all time. That's like saying Vettel has to prove himself is like telling Prost that he's a failure because he got sacked from Ferrari, even though he came back, went to Williams and went on to win the world championship again and retired as, at the time, the most successful Formula One driver in terms of wins. So does Vettel actually have anything to prove to anybody, or is this is the revival of Sebastian Vettel?
Well, I think we should draw attention to the notes we've got up on the screen that you wrote here, which says you wouldn't ask Prost to jump back in a car because he was shit at Ferrari, which I think is completely fair. You wouldn't. The difference, I think, between Prost and Vettel is Vettel hit the ground running, fell into the best car straight away, went on a huge slew of absolute, again, Hamilton or Schumacher-esque domination of the sport, and then, a bit like Alonso, tumbled down the rankings and struggled to get back to who he was. But I think that Vettel stands a much greater chance of winning a 5th title with Aston Martin than Alonso does winning a 3rd title with Alpine. He's a great driver, and what happened at the end at Ferrari was sad, and it overshadowed the fact that he was actually pretty good at Ferrari there for a while. He had a couple of really strong years, 2nd in 2017 and 2018. 4th the year before that. In 2015, he came 3rd his first year at Ferrari. So he's always been there or thereabouts. This sort of myth that he was dominated by Charles Leclerc, who made him look very average, was all right. But I don't think that was because Leclerc dominated him. I think that was other factors behind the scene that caused him problems. So while he had an abysmal last year was his worst season since his debut when he finished 14th. I think holding him to that standard is a disservice to a fantastic driver and a real ambassador for the sport.
I think there's an issue there, though. I think when you take those championship finishes in isolation, so you're right, coming 2nd in those 2 seasons that you mentioned, I think the problem was that when he joined Ferrari, eventually he was expected to challenge Hamilton to the title. It was supposed to be this Mercedes-Ferrari battle for the World Championship. And I do think that it's important to mention that, especially, I would say, I think it was 2018, maybe 2017 as well, Ferrari did have at times a better car than Mercedes. Not throughout the whole season, but at times they definitely had a car that could challenge. The closest challenger Mercedes have had since their domination began. And I think that is where, for me anyway, maybe I'm talking more personally, I was really disappointed in those seasons. I was expecting a challenge. I was expecting, yes, these are the 2 most successful drivers in F1 currently in the 2 best cars going at it again. Just like when we had, Senna, Prost, Hakkinen, Schumacher, Hill, Schumacher, those times where we had that, I really felt that was it. And he didn't live up to those expectations in a car that definitely could have fought for those titles. And then you had last season where Leclerc was, whether Leclerc was much more settled in the car, whether it became his team, Vettel lost his confidence. Leclerc absolutely obliterated Vettel last year. So I think that is where this comes from. But I really want to make it clear that you cannot take his 4 World Championship titles away from him, because yes, he was in a Red Bull that was very, very good, but I would certainly say there was much more of a challenge to him in those 4 years than there has been to the Mercedes in the last 7.
Yes, no, he was absolutely the closest competitor to Hamilton that Hamilton has had since Rosberg, which you would expect from a driver of his caliber. And it was unfortunate how poorly he did last year. I think what as you say, whatever the reason, he was completely wiped by Leclerc, but
he just lost his head.
Well, he did, yeah, completely. Although you have those moments like in Turkey where at the very final chicane, Leclerc overcompensated, binned it and handed the podium. Those moments of maturity still shone through. He's still a fantastic driver. And I think the move to a fresh start, a team that wants him, because let's be honest, Ferrari have form when it comes to adopting a driver and then excluding the other. It's clear they see Leclerc as their future champion, their next Schumacher before the next Schumacher. And will the move to Aston Martin revitalise his career? Will he thrive? It sounds like he's doing really well already. There was nothing but overwhelming positivity. He's a popular guy anyway, but the technical discussions about how he's adapting to the new car and the role he's played in improving the team, all of those sound like Sebastian Vettel is back to challenge this season.
Sometimes you do just need that change of scenery, don't you? Sometimes you need to refresh yourself. You need to go somewhere new, whether it's a new challenge or whether it's just, a completely new set of people to work alongside. I can imagine the day he first walked into Aston Martin, he must have been welcomed like a king, which he wouldn't get any more at Ferrari or while he was driving for them. If he was to walk into Maranello, I think there would be a cloud over him. So it does seem like a perfect fit, him and Aston Martin at this sense. A driver in need of revival. He
does lend legitimacy to Aston Martin as a team. Would we be buzzing over the return of Aston Martin if they were bringing back Alonso instead? You sort of go, oh God, why is he still here? Why don't you retire, old man? Or Raikkonen even, really. But bringing Sebastian Vettel brings real clout to a new team or newish team. And I think it works both ways. He helps them, they help him.
If Aston Martin have some teething problems, which I know they are a new team, but obviously they are just a complete rebrand of the Racing Point just gone by. Is he in danger of losing his head again now that we know that he can potentially crumble under that kind of pressure?
Maybe. And if he does, I think he's done. I think he'll retire. He can go and live a fantastic life as a popular F1 figure and still one of the greats of the sport. Third most wins of all time, joint third most titles of all time. That is a brilliant career, especially for saying that he's younger than Hamilton still. It's outstanding from Vettel, and he could go quietly into that good night. But I don't think he will. I think he'll turn it around.
So Lance Stroll now has not only has his dad bought himself an F1 team, his dad has also bought him a 4-time world champion to be his teammate. I'm poking fun a little bit because we're going to move on to talk about your opinions on Lance Stroll in a second, which maybe doesn't follow the consensus. He's rubbing his hands for those together, those who can't see him. But Stroll is going to be in the sport as long as his father is, you would imagine, and like I said about Aston Martin. But now, is this going to be the making of Lance Stroll with a team that, a car that's going to be probably quite quick and a teammate who better, maybe other than Hamilton, who better to learn off as your teammate?
Oh, I see. I'd rather have Vettel as a teammate than Hamilton because I think that Vettel is probably the better mentor of the two. Maybe not the better driver, but I think if you're a young, developing talent, you can probably learn much more from the warmth and support of Sebastian Vettel, who seems like probably the nicest guy on the grid, than you can from Lewis Hamilton. And yeah, this is a fantastic opportunity for both drivers to push on and push forward.
Let's move on to talking about Stroll then. If he doesn't live up to some expectations that he has this season, which I would say a fair expectation would be definitely to finish well inside the top 10 and to probably achieve his best finish that he has achieved so far in Formula One. Maybe grab a podium here and there, which maybe again we're expecting from Aston Martin. If he doesn't achieve those goals, is that just going to perpetuate this opinion of people that he is just there because of his father?
He's got to deliver this season. I think he has to finish higher than inside the top 10. I think really he needs to be inside the top 7. You're still young and still relative, especially compared to everybody else at the top of the grid, still quite inexperienced. He has a lot less experience than Hamilton or Perez or Vettel. He's been in F1 less time even than Verstappen. So he does get a pass for not quite having everything come together. Yeah, he needs to bring it home. There are a lot of incredibly unfair suggestions that he's only there because of daddy's money. But I think that's completely unfounded. He stepped up to F1 in 2017 at the age of 18 years old with Williams. The money helped, but he had just won Formula 3, comfortably won Formula 3 at that. It was the latter stretch of the season in the final 9 rounds. He was first in all but 2 in which he was second. That's ridiculous form. So he came in doing well. He came third in his 8th race for Williams. 2018 wasn't so good, but that was that car. That car was terrible. And as soon as he got into a better car, the results improved. It's a shame that he had that wobble mid-season, because the 2 retirements in Tuscan Grand Prix and in the Russian Grand Prix, and then in Portimao after missing the Nürburgring through coronavirus, were what gave him a false finishing position. If he just picked up some points there, he'd have finished higher. But it was still his best year in F1. 2 podiums. Brilliant. And yeah, okay, his teammate went on and won a race. His teammate was one of the best drivers of last year. Claiming that Lance Stroll is here for no other reason than he has a rich father is just really unfair. You have to exploit what you've got. Would Mick Schumacher be getting fawned over if his name wasn't Schumacher? Like, would Nikita Mazepin be there without money? Would Max Verstappen be there if his dad hadn't been a forgettable Formula One driver in the 1990s? Yeah, a Formula One driver.
Is he underrated then? Like, and is he ever going to be able to shake off this label that he has as the billionaire's son who wanted a race car for his birthday present? You know, is he ever going to be able to actually move on from that at all? Because his dad is ingrained in the sport now and will be for a while. So can he ever get away from it?
Yes. No. If Lance Stroll starts to win, people will shut up, whether he's in the 3rd best car or not, whether he got there because sponsorship got him into a struggling Racing Point or not. It doesn't really matter. If he can deliver the results, there will always be naysayers, that people who are, he's overrated. You see it with Hamilton. How Hamilton's only winning because he has the best car. Things like that. It's something he can never fully get away from, but it's something that I think nobody can credibly accuse him of if he can pick up the results, finish inside the top 6 this year.
And it's fair to say as well that every year he's been in Formula One, he has been improving. He's pretty much doubled his points tally year on year, other than that Williams that you mentioned in, I think it was 2017, where it was, you know, a dreadful car. And continued to be for the next few years. But he pretty much just kept getting better and better. But then again, you could argue that, again, apart from that Williams in 2017, the car he's been driving has been getting better and better. So is that just him and the car going hand in hand, improving as things going along?
3rd consecutive podcast, I'm going to say this, but you need the best car to get the best results. Very rarely do you see a Gasly at Monza? Do you see a Vettel at Monza? Do you see a shock back marker? These things don't happen very often for a reason. You didn't see Alonso wiping the floor at Minardi. You saw Senna fighting at Tolman, but he was never in any serious danger of winning the title. You have to have a good car to get the good results.
So, I mean, just to kind of finish up on Stroll, because it is a really interesting debate to have about him and this label that he carries. But is he just simply going to potentially be another kind of Jacques Villeneuve, where he just jumps into the best car when he comes into Formula One? Mate, I think I wrote this down to compare him with Jacques Villeneuve, but it's a pretty easy comparison to make just simply because they're both Canadian, and maybe I'm being a bit unfair. But when Villeneuve came into the sport, he did come in with a bit of pedigree, to be fair, not in Formula One. Jumped into that Williams, which dominated the field in '96 and '97, and then obviously went off to BAR and never really hit the same heights. Are we expecting? Is that just an easy comparison to make between Stroll and Villeneuve, where I'm expecting Stroll to have been handed the best car at some point, maybe win a world title, and then just fade away because actually he starts to decline again?
I think some Formula One drivers fail because of things outside of their driving. Alonso never achieved his maximum potential because he was a bastard. Villeneuve never achieved his maximum potential because he was arrogant. Bertrand Gachot never achieved his full potential because he went to prison for macing a taxi driver. But Lance Stroll, I think, is not going to suffer from that. I think if he doesn't make it, it's because he isn't good enough. And I could still be proved wrong, and he could still turn out to be very average. But I think that comparing him to Villeneuve, beyond the fact they're both Canadian, belies the huge differences. Villeneuve came in the son of a Formula One legend who, and this is going to be an even less popular opinion than Lance Stroll is a good driver. He came in as the son of a Formula One driver who never actually achieved very much in his lifetime. Tragic, and perhaps if it hadn't been for that crash at Zolder, we might have seen Villeneuve take the title in 1981 or whatever. But that arrogance was Villeneuve's undoing. He felt undervalued at Williams, probably rightly so. Speaking of bastards, Frank Williams, notorious bastard. But his refusal to go to a good team cost him. And I don't think that would be the case for Lance Stroll.
You are dishing all of these out today. You have just called Frank Williams. I mean, yeah, okay. He fired Damon Hill after he just won the title, and then, amongst lots of other things. But wow. Okay, so predictions then. This is the biggest one to call. This is the toughest one to call with Aston Martin. So just to give some context, last season, the Racing Point finished fourth in the Constructors' Championship with 195 points. That was only 8 points behind McLaren, who came third. Stroll finished a career best 11th with 75 points. That was joint with Gasly in 10th. So you could argue he was joint top 10. And Vettel finished 13th last season with only 33 points in that Ferrari, which, like you said earlier on, was his worst finish since his first season in F1 in 2007, where he only drove for half that season anyway, for the Toro Rosso. So where do we think Aston Martin are coming?
This is the hardest one to predict because I think Aston Martin and Red Bull should be quite nip and tuck. Can Vettel find his? Because if Vettel's on top of his game, I don't see Verstappen being able to stop him all of the time. Sometimes, of course, but a charging Sebastian Vettel is a thing of beauty. Again, same with Perez, really. If the Red Bull is slightly better, but Vettel's on form, if the Red Bull is slightly worse, any of those things could combine to ruin my predictions. But I think Aston Martin surely to come third ahead of McLaren. I think what they've done is enormous in the off season. I would rather have Sebastian Vettel than Daniel Ricciardo as my new signing. And I think we're going to see Vettel come fifth. I think he's going to fight his way back to fifth place. I got Red Bull down to be more dominant. I have Verstappen and Perez in my head both to win races next season. But I think that Stroll is going to improve all the way up to seventh. And the experience of Daniel Ricciardo is going to tell, but Stroll will finish relatively comfortably ahead of Norris, certainly ahead of both Ferraris, and ahead of Gasly, who I've got in 10th.
Okay, so it's interesting because you think you're calling the Aston Martin Red Bull battle. I actually think it's going to be a McLaren Aston Martin battle for that third place. And I've put McLaren in third in my predictions in our first podcast. So I think Aston Martin are going to come fourth this season. And I think that Vettel is still going to have a little bit of a hangover from last year, a little bit, which is going to hold him back initially. I think that Stroll is going to be more consistent, but not quite have what it takes at the moment in order to push that Aston Martin further up. So I'm going to say Aston Martin fourth, Sebastian Vettel in sixth in the World Championship, which would put him behind Ricciardo in my predictions. I think that sixth for Vettel is a good season, to be honest. It was last year was a disaster. 33 points. I can't get my head around that. That is such a low score for, I think it was 17 races, maybe 18 races that we had last season.
He scored points in only 7, and only when he came third in Turkey did he finish higher than 6th.
That's hard to recover from, even for a 4-time world champion. So I think if he comes 6th, that's a really successful season. So 6th place for Vettel and 8th place for Stroll as well, which I still think for Stroll is a decent season. Like you said, he's still really young. He's 22 years old. To come 8th in the World Championship in a decent car, I think is a good achievement. So Aston Martin 4th, Vettel 6th, and Stroll 8th.
This is by far the car I'm most excited to see, because I just cannot predict where it's going to be, but it has the potential to deliver absolute fireworks.
Definitely. And this was the podcast I think I was the most looking forward to as well, talking about the Aston Martin, because it's a beautiful looking car. And Aston Martin, we've got Aston Martin on the grid. We can actually say that, which is, I just think that's incredible. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We really appreciate it. Please do hit like, subscribe, turn those notifications on. And like I said before, leave us some comments. How do you think Aston Martin are going to do this season? Are we expecting them to push any Red Bull? Can they launch a title challenge? If not, is it going to be a battle between them and Red Bull? Is it going to be between them and McLaren? Whereabouts are they going to finish? Are we going to have a revival for Vettel? And is Stroll going to live up to some expectations that he has? Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Haas launch. I believe it is. Indeed it is. We'll see you then.